Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Dini Khairunisa, and today I'm gonna talk about a topic that we've been discussed before in the learning session, but today I'm gonna talk about it and explain more about it. And it is about language, dialect, and variety. So, to be start with, I think it's a common knowledge for us that we know that people from all over the world share either a very similar or very different languages. For example, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, they speak their language respectively, right? But when they go to another country and they found people that look like them, that appears to be like them, but they speak in a different languages, it will confuse them. It will be confusing because they look similar but they speak unsimilar, they speak differently. That's why we need to know how to distinguish certain languages from others, right? According to Bell, there are 6 criteria how to distinguish certain languages from others. And the first criteria is standardization. It refers to the process by which a language has been codified in some way. This process involves the developing of the grammar, the spelling of the words, the syntax. So it more like the system of the language. For example, the Bible. When it first came out, the Bible was came out in the Greek or Latin languages, but as time goes by, they try to translate the Bible into English languages so that they can share the Bible to all over the world and people from all over the world could understand it. Therefore, the Bible was standardized. There you go. And when they translate the Bible, they not just translate the language. They not just change the language. They also did a deeper research about how the social status, how the the condition of the people in that era. So it is how the standardization works. It also happen in the education sector, in literature sector, and the courts sector. And the second criteria is historicity. Right, historicity refers to the fact that a particular group of people find a sense of identity through a particular language. For example, when we learn this certain language, when we acquire this language, we will feel belonged, that it has become our identity, and it will create a bond that tied we all who use this certain language. And the third, we're gonna move to the third. The third is autonomy, right? It refers to a language that must be felt by the speakers to be different from other languages. So it is more subjective because it is how each person felt about this language. For example, Cantonese and Mandarin believe that they speak believe that they speak the same language. right? They believe that they speak the same Chinese language but in a different dialect. But in fact, they speak a very two different languages that each other could not even understand each other's language. But they deny it. They believe that they speak one same language but in a different dialect. So that's why this autonomy is very subjective, right? That was the third, and now we're gonna move to the fourth criteria, and it is reduction, right? It refers to the fact that a particular variety may be regarded as a sub-variety rather than an independent entity. For example, speakers of Cockney will say that they speak a variety of English, but they deny that they are representative speakers of English. So for people that are not from England, this will be confusing. Like, so what are they? They speak a variety of English, but they don't represent English. So what is Cockney? So I did some research, right? And I found out that Cockney is basically an accent that is used by people who live in London. So Londoners mostly speak in Cockney. But people who are not lived in London could not understand the Cockney. For example, let's say England as a country, it has so many cities such as Birmingham, Oxford, Manchester, Liverpool, and London is one of them, right? And people who live in London, they speak in a Cockney accent that other countries in England could not understand their accent, but London people understand the English. So that's why Cockney is a sub-variety of English, but they don't represent English because they don't speak English in general. They don't speak English that could be understood by all of the people, but they are the variety of English, right? That was reduction. And the fifth criteria is mixture. Okay, it refers to feelings that speakers have about the purity of the variety that they speak, and it mostly find in French and German. That French, for example, French and German, they believe that the language that they use is the pure language, that the language was not mixed by other language or was not borrowed by other language. So they believe that French and German is the pure language. There you go. And the last criteria is de facto norms. Okay, it refers to the feeling that many speakers have that both good and poor speakers, they believe that good speakers are representative of the proper usage of the language. For example, in French, there is a variety language that is called Parisian French, and they believe that Parisian French is one of the good speakers, one of the good variety language, that it is representative of the proper usage of the language. And again, it is subjective because it is more like how the people felt about the language, right? That was the sixth criteria of how to distinguish certain languages from others. And now we're gonna move to the dialect, right? Dialect. There are two type of dialect. The first is regional dialect and the other is social dialect. But we're gonna talk about regional dialect first. So, regional dialect refers to regional variation in the way a language is spoken. For example, when we travel to a certain area, certain regional, we will find that people in this certain regional, they speak in a different dialect. Even though they live in the same regional, they speak in a very different dialect, depend on what part of regional they from, what ethnicity they are, what the gender, etc. So it is very possible in one regional to have variety of dialect. And the second is social dialect. Social dialect has a function to describe in speech associated with various social group or classes. For example, people from high social class will speak in a different dialect from people from middle social class. So they will use a very different dialect, even though they live in the same regional, same country. It could happen, right? That was the dialect. Now we're gonna talk about styles and registers. There you go. Style. So style is a scale of formality. It is how we speak in a different style, depend on different participant. For example, when we talk in front of public in, let's say it's a formal event, we will use a formal language that is grammatically correct, that is proper language. But when we talk to our friends, our classmates, we will use an informal language that maybe is not even grammatically correct, and we use a lot of slang. So that is style. That is how we speak in a different style, depend on who we talk to, depend on the participants. That was style. Now we're gonna talk about registers. Okay, registers is sets of language items that associated with discrete occupational or social groups. It describes the language of groups of people with common job or common hobby or common interest. And there are factors to it. The factors are the kind of occasion, the various ages, and the emotional involvement. For example, let's say there's a group of people that consist of 50 years old people, and the other group of people consists of 15 years old group of people. Okay, and these both group use their own style to interact within the group. Like a group of people that consist of 15 years old use their own way, group of people that consist of 50 years old use their own way. Like they use their own way to communicate within the group, and they don't know how each other's group interact in each other's group. So 15 years old don't know how the 50 years old interact within the group, and vice versa. So people who are not from the group will not understand how they interact within the group. Okay, So the communication more secretive and limited, that outsiders people will not understand how they communicate within the group. Okay, and last but not least, we're gonna talk about dialect and accent. So dialect is language varieties that is used by regional or social groups. And in one regional, again, like I said before, in one regional, it is possible that they create a different dialect depend on which part of the regional they from, what gender they are, what the social class, etc. And it will affect how they speak in a different accent, because accent is how each person's individual way of pronouncing the language. For example, people who live in the west side of the regional will speak in a different accent from people who live in east side of the regional. Therefore, people who live in north side of the regional will speak in a different accent from people who live in the south side of the regional. So it will create a variation of accent, variation of dialect, even though they live in the same regional, even though they live in one regional, but the accent, the dialect is very variation. There you go. So, well, that was it. That was all about the language, dialect, and variety. And I am so sorry if there were some mistakes that I made, something slipped out, or something that I said that is wrong. So sorry for that. Other than that, thank you so much for your time, your attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.